So I wanted to talk about a recent book haul that I got. And this book haul, I actually went to a different source than what I normally go to get some books. And in this case, they aren't new books. They're actually older books. But I thought, you know what? eBay is a great source for books, and especially older books that sometimes people want to get rid of, they want to unload, and sometimes you can get some really good buys, especially if you're looking at some older books. And that was the case for me as I went to an author that has Detroit, Michigan roots, which is where I'm from originally, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and take a chance on getting these 4 books because they were actually relatively cheap. The author is Paula Gosling, and again, she has some Detroit roots, and when I saw these books were available on eBay and for a pretty good price with shipping and handling essentially waived, again, it was basically an unload to move these books along, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and give them a try. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these 4 Paula Gosling books, and I'll tell you a little bit more about why I was willing to take a chance on that here in this particular video. So first things first, I had another Paula Gosling book. It's called Fair Game that I got a long time ago. I would say maybe a year or 2 years ago, something like that. And I thought, you know what, I really wanted to get that. It was a book that I'd heard people talk about for a long time, and so I got it. I haven't read it yet, so just to be fair, I haven't actually read it yet, but I am going to read it. It is on my list, among many others, but it is on my list. And so I saw other books by Paula Gosling, and again, for a good price. I think I got these 4 for, I think I want to say $9 or something like that, so I thought it was a pretty good buy. So I'm going to talk about these 4 Paula Gosling books. First up is Hoodwink, right there. And Hoodwink is very interesting. It says, the back cover, I'll read, when everyone's trying to fool everyone else, the only person who isn't kidding is the killer. So that's a great little, right there in red, that's a great little attention grabber right there for this particular book. Lieutenant Jake Case, not so much a legend in his lifetime, more of a cautionary tale. Not so much an accident waiting to happen, it already did. And he's got the x-rays to prove it. Chase is taken off his big case and assigned to what looks like a simple murder. Male, middle to late 60s, stabbed in the chest one time, evidence of robbery, no weapon found, maybe just a little too simple. Then he meets beautiful publishing editor Casey Hewson and starts to fall for her in an entirely wrong sort of way. The deceased was about to publish the awful truth about a local gangster and a missing socialite, but publish and pow! There's a drunk who isn't drunk, a mysterious desk that keeps disappearing, a politician with an old grudge, a cack-handed book of hoods who can't get anything right, and the man who keeps buying hats. With a case like this, Chase soon realizes his first mistake was getting out of bed, and his next mistake could be his last. So it sounds kind of interesting. It's kind of a mysterious sort of back cover description that kind of leaves you maybe interested, but also kind of curious about what more Hoodwink has to offer. Next up on the Paula Gosling grab, Monkey Puzzle. This one I thought was kind of interesting as well. Maybe not quite where I was feeling with Hoodwink, the one I just went over. But I'll tell you a little bit more about this one here by reading a little bit from the back cover. Even Lieutenant Jack Stryker had to admit it was a particularly gruesome murder. It wasn't so much the dent in the left temple or the 10 stab wounds in the chest. Whoever had killed Professor Aiken Adamson had cut his tongue out. Why all the anger? Stryker soon found out Adamson was a vicious man, a blackmailer, and a homosexual, detested and feared by his colleagues in the English department. And as his notebook revealed, each one of them had a very good reason for wanting him dead, including Kate Trevorn, who was beginning to have quite an effect on Stryker in more ways than one. It all seemed like a pretty straightforward detective work. until suddenly, one by one, Stryker's suspects become victims, and he is trapped in a tangled web of conflicting motives, emotions, and clues. And at the center of the web waits a monster. So it does sound really interesting. I actually, the more I think about it, maybe I'm putting it a little bit closer to Hoodwink. It does sound like a really interesting story. This is an older book, and sometimes, homosexuality is treated a little bit differently. But I'm actually kind of curious about this one, so I'm thinking that this is going to be one. This one and Hoodwink are going to be ones that I'm going to probably add to my list. I'm thinking that they probably won't necessarily be very fast reads. Right there, you can see a very small typeface, and the pages are kind of packed in there. So it's about 256 pages in this book, but with the way that the lines are spaced and the size of the typeface, it's probably more like a 300 to 400 word book. So we'll see how it goes, but this one definitely sounds interesting. Monkey Puzzle by Paula Gosling. Next up on the haul, Loser's Blues. And this one is a little bit of a shorter description on the back, and this one is actually set in London. Apparently, Paula Gosling ended up moving to London from her roots in Detroit and in the United States in Michigan. So I'll start with the part in red right there. If you want to break a pianist, break his hands, then start shooting at him from the shadows. Johnny Costelli used to have a girlfriend called Lisa, but she left him for a rich, antique-dealing sugar daddy. Now Lisa's dead. The police found her body on some waste ground in North London. Johnny's problem is that Lisa had never quite given him up. Just a one-night stand, and now and then for old time's sake, but it means that he was the last person to see her alive. Johnny's a musician with a future and a new woman in his life. The police want him for questioning, and Lisa's sugar daddy wants him hurt. Or worse. So that's a really cool description, like really right to the point. It gets right into it, and it sounds even more interesting reading it. The more times I read it, it sounds even more interesting to me. So again, this might be another one that I might add to the list here. And I'm looking at the page count here, and this is actually the same as Monkey Puzzle. It's about 256 words, pages, I should say, excuse me. And then like Monkey Puzzle, it's got the really smaller typeface. So, and finally, The Woman in Red. Now it's interesting, when I saw the title of this book, I thought of the 1980s movie with Gene Wilder and Kelly LeBrock, The Woman in Red, and it just kind of made me smile a little bit when I saw that. So I'm guessing this is going to be a lot darker than The Woman in Red, which is a nice comedy for those of you, especially if you were a fan of Gene Wilder. And back then, a lot of people were. I'll start once again with the little red teaser part here that kind of gets you into it a little bit quicker. One well-aimed poison dagger was all... I'll start with the little red part that's the great teaser to get you into the book here. Okay, so one well-aimed poison dagger was all it took to bring him down. Charles Llewellyn had been a young, up-and-coming career diplomat in Madrid until the well-aimed stab in the back banished him to the British consulate in Alienate. Now he's not so young and getting nowhere. Sudden death in a high-rise block and an elderly English expatriate under arrest for murder is not a prospect he relishes. But it's all part of his job. Just like the arrested man's family, notably his painter son, deceased with a bunch of forgery charges staining his reputation, and the daughter-in-law with more curves than brains. That was an interesting way of putting it. Sorting it all out is Llewellyn's forte, except that when protecting an Englishman's rights in Spain involves you in utter mayhem and more murder, and nothing is what it seems, it's time to find a way out, if there's one to find. So it's a really interesting book, again, set in Europe, with some roots, of course, in Spain, as well as in, looks like Great Britain. So it's a really interesting story. I'm kind of, going back and forth about how much I want to give this one a try, but it does sound really interesting. I'm used to kind of gravitating more toward locations that I'm more familiar with, but I want to try to branch out a little bit more and try to go with different types of stories, different types of genres, different types of backgrounds, and to try to expand my reading tastes a little bit more as I go along, as I get older, because obviously you can see by the white hair that I'm not getting any younger. So I want to try to get different looks at different types of stories, writing, genres, to try to expand what I've been accustomed to, because I think sometimes you get in a groove of what you like to read and you just keep going at that. And I'm not saying there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but at the same time, it's kind of good to branch out a little bit and try some different things, because you never know what you're really going to like. So those are the 4 Paula Gosling books that I got. I'll add to the collection that I'm developing of Paula Gosling. Again, I have Fair Game, which is another book that I haven't necessarily talked about here on this channel, but it's a really cool book that will probably be first on my list of Paula Gosling books to read. But these 4 seem very interesting to me, and I'm looking forward to at some point giving these a try. So if you would, please hit the like button for this video, and if you're so inclined, for more content about book reviews, also tips about writing and the progress that I'm making for writing that could be similar to the progress that you're making in writing, to build a nice community of people talking about reading and writing, please consider hitting the subscribe button as well, and I'll see you in the future with more content on this channel.